Lev Yashin is known today as one of the greatest goalkeepers of all time. His humble beginnings as the child of industrial workers in Moscow, forced from their homes due to the German invasion, to a legend of the game who holds multiple records to this day. He holds legendary status with the Russian people and the rest of the soccer world. Nicknamed the Black Spider, his athleticism, bravery, and formidable presence at the heart of defense revolutionized the goalkeeper position. From his domestic successes to gold at the Olympics in 1956, this is the story of Lev Yashin. Yashin was born in the Begorskoye district of Moscow in October 1929. Not much is known about his early years, but we do know that in 1941 he was forced into child labor to support the war effort. Shortly thereafter, his family would relocate to Yelenovska for the duration of the Second World War, as Nazi forces would descend on the streets of Moscow by October. After the war, Yashin returned to Moscow and resumed working and playing soccer at a factory before being drafted into the military service in 1947. He would continue playing soccer with a sports society called Krylia Sovetov. By 1948, he was back in Moscow and would start training with Dynamo Moscow, where he would start his professional career. Yashin would debut for Dynamo Moscow in 1950, but would have some trouble breaking into the first team and wouldn't appear again until 1953. But by then, he also would win a junior cup with the Soviet ice hockey team. Yashin grappled between hockey and soccer during most of his early career, but chose to focus on soccer sometime around 1955. Over the course of Lev Yashin's 20-year career, he won the Soviet Domestic League on 5 occasions and the Domestic Cup on another 3. Yashin found great success on the international stage as well. He anchored Soviet teams to gold at the 1956 Melbourne Olympics and also won the 1960 Euros in France. Yashin was awarded the coveted Ballon d'Or in 1963 and is the only goalkeeper to ever be given the award to date. Ultimately, Yashin appeared for 326 games for Dynamo Moscow, a team that is historically affiliated with the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the KGB. Yashin spent all 20 years of his playing career at Dynamo Moscow after he made his debut in 1950 at age 21. The soccer competition at the 1956 Games in Melbourne was contested by 11 teams. Yugoslavia, led by Todor Veselinovic, who played professionally for 20 years around Eastern Europe and then managed for the next 30 years until his retirement in 1998. He won 2 Turkish titles while managing Fenerbahce in the 1980s, and also managed notable clubs like Olympiacos of Greece and Levante of Spain. The United States, who didn't have an active domestic league at the time and would be booted from the competition in a 9-1 thrashing at the hands of the Yugoslavs in the second round. Great Britain, led by James Lewis, who made 90 appearances for Chelsea in the 1960s, and Bulgaria, led by Stefan Boskov, who played 200 matches for CSKA Sofia and managed the 1970 Bulgarian World Cup team to a third-place finish. The Soviets played the United Team of Germany in the first round. In 1956, Germany was split east and west, but this team was mixed of both East and West Germans. Yashin would concede 1 goal to Ernst Günther Habig, who played for FC Köln in Germany throughout his 10-year career. The Soviets would win the match, however, 2-1, thanks to goals from Anatoly Isayev and Eduard Streltsov, affectionately remembered as the Russian Pele. He scored 99 goals in 222 appearances for Torpedo Moscow and 25 goals across 38 games for the Soviet national team. Although his career would be cut in half after he was sentenced to 12 years of hard labor in a gulag after committing a crime in 1958. He would serve 6 years before resuming play with Torpedo in 1965 to make another 100 appearances. The Soviets played Indonesia in the second round and played a scoreless 120 minutes on the 29th of November 1956. Today, the match would move to a penalty kick shootout to resolve the tie. However, penalty kick shootouts were not introduced at the professional level until 1970. The first professional match to end in a shootout was the 1970 Watney Cup final in England between a United side managed by the great Sir Matt Busby and led by George Best and a rather forgettable Hull City team. The Soviets would win a replay on December the 1st, 4-0 to advance to the final. Yashin and the Soviets would face and defeat Yugoslavia in the final 1-0. Yashin and his comrades win gold, and Yashin would only concede 2 goals across 4 games in the tournament. The Yugoslavs fielded a number of professional players, including some who had long careers across Europe like Dragoslav Sekularak, who scored over 100 goals for Red Star Belgrade. This really was not the norm for Olympic soccer, at least not for teams outside of the Eastern Bloc. Only 2 traditional soccer nations contested for the tournament in 1956, the Germans with a fragmented domestic league, and the English, who didn't field a single professional player, only amateurs. James Lewis, who I mentioned earlier, didn't debut for Chelsea until 1958, over 2 years after the tournament ended. The Olympics simply were not prioritized by many federations across the globe, even today as the U20s lead the American qualification push cycle after cycle. The Soviets and their satellite states would win most of the following tournaments after the Soviets win their first in 1956. The Yugoslavs would win gold in 1960, led by Milan Galic, and the Hungarians in 64, in 68, led by Ferenc Ben, who scored 303 goals for Ojepesti Dosa. The Poles would win in 1972, before the Germans in 76, and Czechoslovakia in 1980. France would break Eastern European domination of the Olympic soccer tournament by winning gold in 1984, before the Soviets would win one last Olympic gold in 1988, before the Union would dissolve in the early 1990s. Yashin had a tumultuous upbringing in a working-class family. Having been displaced by the German invasion of Russia, he really didn't have the opportunity to be selected to be a part of an academy and was far from a prodigy. It appears to me that he was really just a kid who enjoyed playing goalkeeper in hockey and soccer and was really quite good at it. Yashin appeared to be a Soviet nationalist in some respect. A quote on FIFA.com attributed to Yashin reads, quote, "The joy of seeing Yuri Gagarin flying in space is only superseded by the joy of a good penalty save," end quote. However, another quote attributed to Yashin on that very same site claims that he was enamored by Ferenc Puskás' wealth as a footballer in Hungary and reportedly told Puskás he would like a share of similar wealth or to live outside of the Soviet Union. After the end of Yashin's playing career, he worked in various administrative positions with Dynamo Moscow before falling out with chairman Pyotr Bogdanov. Yashin died in 1990 of stomach cancer and was given a state funeral as a Soviet-honored Master of Sport and was also awarded the Order of Lenin, which was the Soviet Union's highest civilian award. Yashin revolutionized the way the goalkeeper position was played in global soccer. He was one of the first to shout orders to his defenders, which is commonplace among modern goalkeepers, and was one of the first to play a sweeper-keeper style that would be perfected by modern greats like Manuel Neuer. Lev Yashin was renowned for his world-class reflexes and athleticism. His selection for the FIFA Team of the Century and legendary status he enjoys across Russia and the soccer world is very much deserved. Lev Yashin was the greatest goalkeeper of all time.